AI is the greatest transformation in the human-computer interaction, maybe forever, but definitely since the conception of graphic interface. For us product people, it gives an interesting opportunity to really start rethinking how the interactions should look like. I don't know, 5 years ago, we had the excuse that it had technical limitations, but now we can start thinking much more ambitiously in the regard, like how would it look like in the dream world? When we started looking at the online stores, then it's really cumbersome to actually find anything from there. For instance, a fashion e-shop. What is your approach? You could start with search and you type in certain search terms what you really want to find. If the query that you enter will be descriptive enough so that it would actually reveal what you are looking for, because no one wants to buy a t-shirt. Everyone wants to buy something more specific than a t-shirt. But when you enter this more specific into the search bar, then probably you will get 0 results. Why do users have to act like programmers to interact with an e-store? We started thinking, what if we could do away with all that, and if we could build a search that requires no words at all? So you would just start thinking about something really hard and you would magically find it without needing to enter any search queries or configure any filters.
Hey, Mart, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining. When you met at the conference, when I listened to your talk, I was 100% sure that I want to have you on the podcast and talk about the product you have been building and also your journey. So let's a little bit talk about your journey and your background.
What do you want to know? Where should I start?
Sure. You were talking about journalism, so let's just go from there.
Yeah. So I started out my career indeed as a journalist. I had my first education in media and communication and then became a journalist of sorts. So producing radio shows, but also myself hosting some of these shows. I did it for maybe definitely north of 10 years, maybe even close to 15 years on and off. And what happened was that I started a business show in partnership with a major bank in Estonia, No Pressure. One of the few actually weekly hour-long business shows that we had on nationwide radios back then. And my co-host was an executive board member from this bank. And I needed a second host and I didn't have anyone for a reason or another. And then I myself assumed the role of this host. It was all very exciting, but I discovered that I didn't know anything about business. And then I went back to school and got myself degrees in economics, both bachelor's and master's. And after that, it felt a bit stupid to go back to something as trivial as journalism. Sorry, not anything about you or a podcast, but I was looking back at what I did in the past and what I could do now. And then I got involved in startups, product management, technology management. And this is what led me here.
That's awesome. What did you learn as a journalist that you think helped you in continue your journey in product management?
In journalism, it's really very important to understand what's important here. And it's very similar with product management, because it's in product management, we always try to think what is really crucial here? What do we need to notice here? What is that we could YOLO? What is that we really need to nail here? And in journalism, when you have a situation, then in order to be a successful journalist that manages to make any impact, you also need to understand what is really important about this. Something's happening. What is interesting here? Who are the key players, by the way? It's really also a product management related question. Something's happening. Who are the key players? What is driving these key players? What is specific, important, and unique about this situation and these key players? So this is one part. And the other part is, of course, about communication, about the capability to distill really complex topics into something that different types of people could comprehend. And in product management, we are always seeing where we need to translate quite complex business and strategical concepts to engineers so that they would be really motivated and driven and understand how their work matters. And in the opposite direction, we need to distill really complex engineering and technical discourse so that the business stakeholders would understand it and users would comprehend what's happening there.
It's very interesting. I had Radhika Dutt, the author of the product Radical Product Thinking in the podcast a few days ago, and she was talking exactly about like everything is a product if you think about it. A legislation is a product, what you were doing, what you were building is a product. So there are customers, you need to pay attention to those customers, there are different stakeholders. And I really like this way of thinking that everything is a product. We are building it.
Yeah, like what is product? Product is a systematic way to manufacture and deliver value to people around us, pretty much. And this is essence of most human activities, or most like being a human is like how do I build value to myself and people around me and get rewarded by that. And from this perspective, yes, product management could be a distilled way or framework of thinking about this value delivery, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you said economics, right? Did you like spend some time becoming like a technical product manager or no?
You know, my life with the computers, you know, I don't know like how much do we think nowadays about computers, because everything is like most interesting things are happening in the cloud or in mobile devices. And so like computers is maybe something a bit steampunkish already. But when I started with like IT or the technology, then we had computers, and it was way back in the 80s. And most people didn't actually own their own personal computers back then. It was quite rare. But I was lucky to have the opportunity at like workplaces of my relatives to use computers, even mid-80s. And so I got into programming, writing code myself, and I have always dabbled in code to one degree or another as I have time. And then when I discover a new concept, then I try to try them out, at least to some extent, hands-on. And so I don't have formal technical education and formal professional experience in, let's say, technical jobs, but I am quite technical, and this is related to this upbringing of being really like close to computers and really, how to say, it's I think like it has been one of my like most crucial hobbies or things that I do throughout my life.
Yeah, why I'm asking this is we will get to that a little bit later, but I know that you're working in a really great startup and it's very AI focused. So I was thinking like, what's the level of involvement that you have as a co-founder and a CPO there? But just back on the technical topic, I was reading a LinkedIn article post some time ago, and it was saying that I think back in like 1980s to the year, let's say 2000, people who were born kind of in that era, those are the people who are actually really interested in IT and computer as a computer. Because like I remember I used to disassemble my desktop PC many times, and it was always fascinating, the graphic card, the RAM, the hard drive, and I don't know, just updating the BIOS will make me happy, and installing Windows and all those like difficult things. But now when I look at the new generation, it's really not fascinating for them. They just don't really care about the hardware of the PC, and their interest is kind of beyond that. I feel like they have more interest toward like tools and softwares rather than like, let me assemble my PC and how the PC would work.
I haven't noticed. At our company, we do have engineers from, let's say, all generations. Of course, like they are all keenly technical, and in the field of AI specifically, it's quite hardware sensitive in the sense that you can burn your cloud bill quite fast if you aren't really deep technical in the sense of how the hardware and software are working together. I really can't tell if there is anything like that going on. But superficially, yes, the user interfaces have become so nimble, so to say, that it's easy to get a sort of digital experience by not being technical at all. But I don't know, like way back in the 80s, you had the command prompt, and you needed to start from there. So a degree of technical skill was table stakes back then. Yes, something is happening there.
Yeah, it's very, for me, it's very fascinating, the changes of generations. And of course, I think the biggest one will come with the more expansion of AI. And now
Yes.
speaking of AI, let's jump to Miros.ai. Can you a little bit tell us about it?
I would briefly even go back to the how people interact with computers topic, and you brought in the AI like as a theme there. And I would claim that AI is one of the greatest epochs that we have in the evolution of humans interacting with computers. And I mean, even on the level of UI. So I would claim that AI is also a type of UI because you have the graphical interface. You didn't have to use command prompt anymore, and you could be more like pointy, touchy with the computers. This evolved into the touchscreen interfaces, and but it's part of the same story. So how do I give commands to the computer using visual interfaces and pointing something? What is happening now with AI, and I will bring you an example. A lot about the circular economy and reusing the resources that we have, so to say. And for that reason, I quite often I go through like what I have in my garage or whatnot, and sell some of this stuff on the Facebook Marketplace. And once I got a message from the Facebook Marketplace chat assistant, like in the Facebook Messenger, this haven't sold. So I type back, reduce the price by 20%. And the Facebook chat assistant responded, no, I can't respond to messages. But of course, my expectation become that if something is messaging me, then I should be able to message back. And you see, now with the ChatGPT, of course, primarily, but also other AI-driven experiences, we as users, we start having different expectations as to how computers understand us. And from this regard, we can start looking at AI as form of UI. And now when you think about this, users already have expectations building up how the UI of the future, or even today, how it should look like. And getting stuck in the past where your interface cannot understand the users and cannot respond in real time and sensibly becomes a challenge for great many companies. So I think I have a theory that AI is the greatest transformation in the human-computer interaction, maybe forever, but definitely since the conception of graphical user interface. Like a small side guest here.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I also think the term prompt engineering is like programming in the 1960, like how it used to be. So I think as we go forward, also the prompt engineering is going to become more advanced and more simplified to reach what you want as a user.
I think it's for us product people, it gives an interesting opportunity to really start rethinking how the interactions should look like. Because I don't know, 5 years ago, or even less, we had the excuse that this is we have technical limitations. So what we can do, if I'm ordering an Uber or whatnot, that there is a technical sandbox where this interaction needs to take place in, and I have an excuse. It cannot be much better. At least it cannot be much better by a magnitude. But right now, we can really when we start thinking about it's possible to decompose the entire interaction and build it up anew. And start thinking much more ambitiously in the regard, how would it look like in the dream world? Because the dream world, at least for us, is becoming more a possibility right now. It's becoming and then connected to the fact that I mentioned that users are building up these expectations regarding how it actually could work. I have an assumption that Facebook Marketplace, if it gets in touch with me, then I should be able to respond and make it do stuff, right? Because you are the one who started this conversation. So why are you talking to me if you don't want to respond? So why is it so one-sided? And now we know that our competitors are making a move. Someone from our competitive set is making a move toward this dream world. And if you stay back and hide behind the excuses that technically it can't work much better anymore, and then I think that we have bad news coming our way quite soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the barrier to entry to the AI world has also been reduced. A lot of startups are now using OpenAI's API, and they call themselves AI startups, which is debatable, but at the same time, they are providing some of those functionalities which you as an AI company would have. So yeah, it's a very interesting time. Now, I really like to talk about Miros. Can you a little bit share about Miros?
Miros is an e-commerce search company. So our customers are e-commerce companies, and our product is a very advanced search service. So when you would go to a website or an internet shop of our customer and start using any search functionality, then chances are that it's powered by our technology. So software as a service, and the service itself is e-commerce search.
And I remember in your talk, you talk about the wordless search. So how the concept of the wordless search come about, and what problem were you aiming to solve with that?
Yeah. So we started looking at how simple it is to find items in e-commerce, and where this way of thinking, where it originated from, is that there are two major costs in e-commerce: is the cost of inventory and cost of user acquisition, naturally. So normally, about what the e-commerce conversion rate that we see is 1.52%. In some rare cases, it might deviate from that, but the baseline is like in 1 to 2% territory. So it's much higher in the physical retail, of course, depending on the vertical, whether it's like groceries or durable goods or fashion or whatnot. It can be like 22% conversion rate in physical stores. In like groceries, of course, is much higher. So why is it that online stores have so weak conversion rates? Like, we take it for granted that it needs to be it can't be over 2%. Why can't it be over 2%? And now, when we started looking at the online stores, then it's really cumbersome to actually find anything from there. And when we look at the experience, it's a lot like programming. So you need to, you will go to an online store of your choice. You can now start imagining, for instance, a fashion e-shop that you have used. You go there. What is your approach? And you could start with search, and you type in certain search terms, what you really want to find. And if the query that you enter will be descriptive enough so that it would actually reveal what you are looking for, because no one wants to buy a t-shirt. Everyone wants to buy something more specific than a t-shirt. But when you enter this more specific into the search bar, then probably you will get 0 results. Then you start reverse engineering, how can I enter something that would yield any response at all? And then you do a bit of trial and error, and you would end up with a search query that actually works. But by that time, it has become so broad that what you see there is not relevant anymore. Step 2, what do I do now? Then you start fiddling around with the filters. And same story, you need to get the precise combination of filter that would still have something in the result set, but wouldn't be overly broad. And then we see users opening 20, often more browser tabs to compare these items, and it's really a mess. And of course, it's very simple to get discouraged in this situation. And since the exit costs in e-store is much cheaper than in physical store. In physical store, you need to find your way to the parking corral and then drive back home being very sad. Just close the tab and off you go, naturally. From this point, why do users have to act like programmers, software developers, to interact with an e-store? And it brings us back to the same conversation about the revolutions in UI. So what can be expected? I don't know, maybe in an 80s or 70s e-shop, it was expected that someone who wants to shop online, of course it's joke, no one was shopping online, but would need to write actual code to do that. And now I think that the e-commerce experience is stuck in late 90s. So we have the category trees. You remember the naivety of the thinking that we could distill the entire internet into some kind of catalog. Start with hobbies, sports, basketball, and then find your information on the internet. E-stores are a lot like that. And now we started thinking, what if we could do away with all that? And if we could build a search that requires no words at all? So there wouldn't be any debugging, because you would just start thinking about something really hard and you would magically find it without needing to enter any search queries or configure any filters. And then we went ahead and actually built the thing that quite consistently enables users you find items from hundreds of thousands of items within 60 seconds by just thinking really hard about what they want to find and interacting with the items.
So let's do a comparison example of before using Miros and after using Miros. So I wanna understand like how advanced we could go. Let's say if I go to like an e-commerce shop and I write cyberpunk blue shoe with orange dot, it will show me no results, right? But if we use Miros, it will show the results, correct?
And the wordless search actually is one of our products that doesn't require any words. So what you do right now, it is a web overlay or a widget for e-commerce that you open and then start interacting with the items, sort of similar to Pinterest. And so by scrolling around and clicking on different sorts of items, we find commonalities of these items and the user behavior. And then the journey will be biased towards your dream item. So we could imagine like a universe of, for instance, lamps. So we have like 100,000 different lamps. And then by scrolling around, browsing and clicking, the user would start revealing their preferences. I'm interested in more rustic looking stuff, more like wood as material, something like that. And so the selection would then start being steered in this direction. Or we could go in another direction, something really minimalist. And the computer would take notice and start exposing items that go in this direction. And so it's a fluid navigation experience that enables you to either get to know the entire inventory in the C-store by just roughly browsing from one side of the inventory to the other side in terms of properties and styles of these items, or starting really narrowing down into one style and finding your dream item. So that's wordless search. Requires no words at all, consistently finds an item from 100,000 items in 60 seconds. And then we have an NLP or natural language processing search service. We call it discovery bar. So not a search bar, but a discovery bar, because search bar is where you search and discovery bar is what you use to discover items. We have the discovery bar, and discovery bar indeed is an AI-driven conversational search where you can enter pretty much anything and it finds it for you.
So what I described was the discovery tab, correct?
Yeah, discovery bar. Yes, it's really advanced NLP search where we process the e-commerce items through a rather elaborate AI pipeline or machine learning pipeline, extract a lot of interesting information about the items and make them really, really, really findable with minimum descriptions needed. Common challenge or struggle in e-commerce is that items are really very well findable even using legacy search tools, but it requires items to be described. So for instance, going with cyberpunk sneakers. So no one in her right mind would go in and label a sneaker like this looks like cyberpunk. Because if you label it cyberpunk, then you need to label it with like thousands of other obscure labels. And now what we do is, of course, that we extract the embeddings from the entire description and the photos, product photos. And then we have really good, let's call it AI awareness, what the product is. And when a user types in a search query, then we can deliver really like good matches because of the proximity of a cyberpunk semantic meaning and whatever we extracted from these items. And then boom, like magic, it starts working.
That's very fascinating. And can you a little bit share more about the technical aspect of it? How is it working?
People are human beings are semantical beings. So they think in meanings and concepts a lot of the time, especially when exercising a pragmatic activity, for instance, shopping. So they have certain concepts in mind, and these concepts by nature are usually semantic concepts. I'm looking something dark. I'm looking something nutritious. So the nutrition is semantic meaning. It means that it has the nutrient that I need. So everything that we do and think in this regard is semantically driven. And now what has been the challenge, for instance, in search has been that there is a little semantic awareness about the products. We know that they are labeled in a certain way and they have certain textual descriptions, but this doesn't mean that anyone understands the semantic essence of these items. So what we are technically doing is that we are running the e-commerce. What we do is that we are synchronizing the entire e-commerce shop inventory into our systems, and then we run it through machine learning pipelines to, let's say, assign meaning to these items, assign programmatically usable meanings to these items. And on the other hand, we take a search query and run this search query. Someone would write in cyberpunk sneakers, a nutritious meal, something like that. And then we run the query through another pipeline to extract the semantic context or semantic content actually from the search query. And then we compare these two, the meaning, semantic meanings of the items and the semantic meaning of the search query. We compare it and start responding with proximity matches. A next logical question would be that to which extent we are using LLMs for this purpose, because the AI technical space is now a lot about LLMs. A short answer is that LLMs for us is several magnitudes too slow and too expensive. For us, on the 100 millisecond query response speed is something that we consider viable, something that is not degrading user experience, and servicing this with LLMs, specifically with external LLMs, especially external LLMs, we could be looking at probably at seconds, and cost-wise as well, we need to be by several magnitudes more economical than LLMs could afford us.
And when let's say you go to a partner, an e-commerce platform, and they agree to use Miros as a SaaS product. So you're pulling the inventory, right? Are you focusing on the description of the product, title of the product, or you also analyze the photo of a product, like multiple photos, and you start to build the, let's say, assumptions and you start to build the data based on just the photos?
We are using photos and selected metadata. So metadata is descriptions, but also different other metadata fields like material, condition, manufacturer, country, whatnot. This all is metadata. And so with different e-stores, being quite an early stage company, by the way, so we are actually a seed stage company still. We do a lot of let's say custom adaptation, and not in the sense that we are developing a special product for each customer, but we still, for instance, with the integration, you have quite a bit of manual work there, and where we can also exercise certain choice. So this example is which information about the products we want to use in this situation. So we make a decision there. What adds to the, let's say, to the richness of the item description and what does not. Could be, for instance, in the future where we could look at would be if our customer would have shopper reviews or product reviews by the customers. Could this bring in additional insight? Potentially, yes. Haven't gone in this direction, yes. But largely, I think there would be in the future other avenues of enriching this data.
And you talked about not using large language models. Is it because you also maybe don't need it? Because of from my understanding of the LLMs, they're trying to provide solution for many different problems, right? But in your case, you have one specific problem and you are building a great solution for that specific problem. So for you, speed becomes much more as an important factor rather than building a product that will have all the solutions, right?
Yeah, you're right. And LLMs for us is we do have LLMs running on our infrastructure as well. And they are a great way to manufacture synthetic data for model training. So even though it's not sustainable to use it in production with actual service provision, it's great to use them for for our internal development. Synthetic data generation is a good example.
Can you explain what do you mean by synthetic data for model training?
For instance, if we want to become better in our, let's say, semantic awareness of products in the vertical of, let's say, construction materials. So the models that we're using are specifically trained on construction materials. So they could be great generic models or fashion models or whatnot, because most of our customers actually are in fashion space, and they would understand a bit about construction materials, but not a lot actually. So what we could do is that we could annotate certain construction materials, like creating a taxonomy of how to annotate construction materials, and then go take a few tens of thousands of construction material items, and then turn around and use this data to train models that are more sensitive and more accurate for, say, construction materials.
And when let's say you train this model internally, so you use it as like testing until you feel more confident about that model for that to be shipped to a partner?
It's another interesting question, like how can we be confident that this model can be shipped? So which takes us into another interesting domain, which is the AI metrics. So how to even measure AI, like, is an interesting topic. And as a teaser about this topic, most of the IT solutions up until today, mostly, they have been deterministic in the sense that you have inputs and you have logical outputs. In AI, you don't have that. And then how to measure what you're getting is becoming an interesting ant's nest. But back to the topic that you asked about, what is our methodology about the custom model training? That's precisely how to train models that are fatter where they need to be and leaner where we don't need them to be fat. Models that are very smart about something and very dumb about something else that is not relevant. At this point, which enables us to trim down our infrastructure costs. Let's say at production scale, ML/AI, of course, infra costs and the entire scope of infrastructure, cloud management, and the entire cost optimization becomes a topic really, really fast if you start getting serious with that.
And everyone is now in war to get their hands on the graphic cards of NVIDIA. These models, when you're training, you also need GPU power, correct, right?
This is correct.
And how long approximately takes for you to train a model?
This is something that I will not answer anymore, because this is really, if I start responding to these questions, then my ML engineers will get really angry at me because I'm not really qualified at this stuff.
Absolutely. Now, going to your engineers, you talked about researcher and engineer in your talk, and you used a term called a decoupled research process. Can you a little bit talk about that?
Our solution is a research process that is really open to discovery, and we call it the decoupled research process. What does it mean? Decoupled means that we have researchers that work on certain areas of interest or certain research questions. So largely we have two ways of how research starts. It's either an area of interest, which means that, hey, researcher, we are interested in something, how to make our queries 10 times more economical, something. Like how to make our queries 10 times economical is actually a research question in this case, but in this context. But the research question could be areas of optimization in like image processing models in AI or something. And so the researchers then work decoupled from the engineers so that they don't hinder the working processes of engineers who are working in our company with 2 week sprints, who are really tactical. We need to deliver a solution to fix this problem, whatnot, and it's really fast and really, I would say, solution oriented in the space of engineering. But the researchers work at their own pace, and they don't aim to do anything that is production ready. So it's another question, how can we deploy this in production? It's not a problem for researchers. Researcher is just finding opportunities. And so the product function is helping research define the research questions and the areas of interest. And from that, the research then comes back with research reviews, where we see from the side of product, we either see proof of concepts, So not production ready test bench solution that are like demonstrating something in this direction, or they might come back with verdicts, for instance, that like didn't find anything useful or whatnot. And this is also giving then the product function to come up with more, let's say, transformational roadmaps, and engineers come up with more transformational solutions, because the research function is always feeding in new discoveries and breakthrough ideas to us. But they don't get tangled between each other, because actually researchers and engineers, they don't appreciate, in our experience, the ways of working, like the ways how the other parties working. Engineers want to be like really good. Engineers want to be really fast, really oriented to delivering something tangible on production quality and production scale, whereas researchers are really interested in discovering something new. For engineers, discovering something new could be an insult. Why are you reinventing the bicycle here? Because there is a bicycle already, use the bicycle. But the engineers are precisely the opposite. So having them in separate rooms and meeting each other only occasionally has proven to be quite a good practice.
I love the way you explained about it, especially that I wanted to actually ask that now, what does the researcher really do? And then you just went forward and you answered that question of mine, which I had. But when you talk about the challenges between engineer and researcher, like what are the tips that you have to, one, build the dynamic between them, to avoid the clashes between them?
Good question. So first, clashes often arise from a situation where the alignment is not tight enough. So when people have different core assumptions, and so tight alignment is always important in avoiding any friction down the line. So what I mean by tight alignment is that engineers and the researchers and everyone else in this regard, and this is, I would say, an overarching and common truth about any type of leadership and management, is that everyone has the same goal and share the same basic beliefs about where do we deliver value, who are we, who are our customers, and this sort of stuff. So everyone must be really on the same page regarding this. And from that on, we have logical thinking, like which types of opportunities are even interesting for us, because there might be like researchers coming back with opportunities that have nothing to do with real life, and of course everyone would be quite disillusioned and disappointed about that, for instance. So starting with tight alignment is really important. Then logically goes into the terrain of loose coupling. So if certain people work in a different way, and loose coupling is like quite often is always a good principle, but especially in the cases where the working culture or the working practice or the work contents are really, really different, then it makes sense to make them loosely coupled, in the sense that the engineers are never blocking the work of researchers are never blocking the work of engineers, and vice versa, and researchers are never dabbling in what is the ownership of engineers. For instance, installing their proof of concept models in production infrastructure or whatnot, and vice versa, so that they don't have many opportunities to get tangled between each other.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I like your points on the dynamic. And you being working in an AI startup, in terms of like cost and scalability, because these models require a lot of resources, what challenges do you have and what solutions do you have for those? So kind of like, how do you tackle the challenges of computational cost and scalability when deploying AI models at scale?
This again becomes more a topic to our engineers, but this, like having said, is the question: what are you proving? Are you proving that do we have already a validated assumption that something is providing value if it works? And then the question is in economics or scalability. Then then we should go in and start proving that this thing that we agreed that it's providing value, whether we can do it economically enough. And the other situation could be that the thing that we can do economically enough, does it deliver any value? Usually it makes sense to only start proving one thing at a time. And I would say up until now, we have situations from both sides of the fence. So we have situations where we are right now, maybe let's say we are getting biased towards proving the economic side, but we are still, of course, with some newer features, we are still in the process of finding out whether the core value is there. And in these cases, if the core value is not proven to the level that we find satisfactory, then we don't care so much about what the cost is. And I would say up until now, we have been able to optimize everything by magnitude. So we know that there is always ways to optimize, and we usually don't get really concerned about this off the bat.
Based on your experience working as a product manager, in what ways does product management in an AI startup differ from traditional tech startup?
I think with in any deep technology, the technology space is changing so rapidly that we are constantly blindsided by the technology. So technology is a variable. And in more when using more traditional technologies, then the main focus is around the main way how you can deliver value is that you know your user and her problems better than your competition, or you are more creative around solving these problems. Largely can be two ways how you can be successful. Take any startup operating in with traditional technologies, and if they are really successful, then it's either one of those, and usually to some extent a combination of these two factors. Now with deep technology, it's possible to discover something from the technology that enables you to beat your competition next. So good luck finding a way how to know your users better than your competition 10x. It has happened. Don't get me wrong. It's known to happen occasionally, but it's quite rare. Also, can we be 10 times more creative in addressing this? Sometimes happens when, for instance, a new and more nimble and faster actor comes into picture and listens to the customer much better and is much more agile in addressing the customer need, and it can happen. But in deep technology, and especially in AI, discovering technical options to deliver functionality that brings breakthroughs for the user experience is much higher and happens all the time. For that reason, we really need to be on top of what is happening in the technology context. To really see the new opportunity, the new technical opportunities or opportunities that are caused by the technical transitions. We really need to spot them early, see how they are, how they could be used by us or our competitors. Because if we are not using these new opportunities, someone else will. So that's mainly I would say the biggest difference is how to really keep an eye on the technical landscape and take advantage of the new opportunities really fast, or decide not to take advantage of these opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And what are your thoughts on the future of AI in e-commerce?
Most practically, I think that the customers have received the memo, so to say, that what is possible in terms of customer experience nowadays. It's users are starting to grow a certain set of expectations, and you can't reverse this process anymore. And also there will be e-commerce operations that have also received their memo and going with the change very fast and in a very agile manner. And hence the same concept or theme that I mentioned in the beginning about AI being a great revolution or point of transformation in this space of user interfaces and more broadly customer experience. This will start coining losers and winners. It's already doing it, and it will be another epoch for e-commerce. How e-commerce can start listening to customers much more actively and turn this into source of competitive advantage. And now it's like I think now we already see who are taking the lead in this race, and it like it will not somehow, like the genie will not go back into the bottle, so to say.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree, especially with the latest updates of ChatGPT acting now completely as a search engine and searching throughout the web. So it's super, I would say, risky times for Google.
It's risky times, very well put. It's risky times for everyone, because when a great technical breakthrough comes along, then of course, like always, new winners and losers are made. And it's right now we have the privilege of being part of a great transition in this space. And one might argue the biggest transition in this space that we have seen, because it's also happening really fast. For instance, the adaptation of internet, like it grew like 10% annually in early 2000s and late 1990s, and it was quite a gradual change. And in this regard, the .com boom was like a slow motion explosion in this sense, because like back then it was considered something really explosive. But when we look at the magnitudes of the money involved and people involved, and the scope of change that was affected during this .com boom, looking back at it now, like so much less was on stake, and everything happened so much slower than now. So it will, this time it will probably be much more interesting.
Yeah, for me, what makes me happy is there's always a hope and there's always changes. Meaning, if one company is dominating the market for 5 years, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will be dominating the same market the next 5 and the next 5 years. So why I like it, because people who are working in the startups, there is that possibility that your startup could be definitely beating your competitor, even though they might have a lot of resources.
Yeah, it's also there was an understanding between startups and you know, the like innovator seed, so to say, that it's not the big eating the small, it's the fast eating the slow, so to say. I think this is also has been changing for quite some time now, because the management and leadership practices and product management practices of large corporations have evolved a lot during the last, let's say, like 10 to 15 years space, to the like big old slow company that like we startup people like to sort of like maybe look down a little bit in this regard. And it's a warm and fuzzy feeling that we are like by like a priori we are faster and smarter than these like big old lazy guys. This is not necessarily true anymore. So companies like Amazon, Microsoft, whatnot, Adobe, they have actually become really nimble, and by keeping a keen eye how startups and modern product organizations are operating and taking over these practices quite successfully. So I wouldn't underestimate these guys at all. But for the for startups, it just doesn't mean all that much, because startup as part of the innovation value chain. So a small decoupled, nimble organization with one goal in mind is still a very valid organizational structure for a certain part in the innovation lifecycle. And hence it's a question only does a startup then needs to go for an IPO, or is corporate acquisition just like another logical way? And in this regard, what's the difference whether some innovation gets integrated into the late majority of the market, or maybe early majority or whatnot, gets integrated by then growing through an IPO, or then growing by being integrated into a large corporate framework. I think both are very valid. But what it means for us startup people is that just waiting and hoping that we have time, because the large our large corporate competitors are definitely, they must be slow. Actually, they aren't all that slow anymore.
Going back to Miros, since Miros is a B2B product, what are the challenges to convince these big e-commerce platforms to one, trust your platform, use your platform, and licenses? And do you have any tips there?
What are the key challenges?
And how do you acquire those customers?
Of course, search, like one of the challenges is, of course, our credibility. Of course, search for e-commerce operations, it's not only about search. It's more broadly about the item retrieval. So when you go into a category page on an e-commerce store, then actually it's a search with no query to a certain category. So it's also a search. So it's almost impossible to interact with an e-store without touching search in one capacity or another. And hence the SLA and the overall, let's say, the maturity of the product search service in this case is really, really important. And now what's our challenge here? Like from that is twofold. As a relatively small startup, still a seed stage startup, we are going after quite big customers. So from our customer roster, we can see global and really, really big companies. So how they can like trust our SLAs is one like area of concerns. And secondly is that our search is really good at finding items. I think we are world record holders in finding items. We are really, really strong at that. But search, a solution space, is not limited to finding items. It's also a question, how configurable is the search? How can we boost certain items? What is the business logic of automatically boosting some items, also called merchandising? How well equipped are you for compiling manual collections, curated collections? So like this is also part of what is normally acquired with a search provider by an e-commerce company. And because we are still a very small company, we have made a bet to the search efficiency. So we are doing it really, really great. But there are other things that where we either don't have any functionality or the functionality is quite weak. So this is also like I would say a journey to find the customers who really prioritize this findability and are okay making sacrifices with like the areas where we don't have the strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are slowly getting close to the end of the episode. Do you have any upcoming news you would like to share with the listeners? Any update, any recommendation of books or series?
My go-to book to recommend is usually Mythical Man Month. Don't remember the name of the author, but it's Mythical Man Month. And it's a great book because it makes you think about what is the creative process, how intellectual value is produced, asking questions like, can we compensate talent with headcount? To which extent we can do this? How can we leverage talent with headcount? What is the a constraint in the creative process? And this is a book about software development, but poses some interesting claims or concepts around how this, how it all can work with. I don't subscribe to a lot of thinking that is laid out there, but I think also a good book is something that you can internally object to then strengthen your own confidence. I think it's a very, very good book in challenging the reader to think about what is talent, what is raw work inputs, and how these two can be combined. And also what is interesting about it is that I think it's written in late 60s about the software development process, and it reads like it was written last year. So surprisingly little has changed.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for joining this episode. It's been a great conversation. Listeners, make sure to check Mart's LinkedIn and reach out to him if you have any questions. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.